July 2, 1937. Somewhere above the central Pacific Ocean, a silver Lockheed Electra is searching for an island so small that it can disappear beneath haze, cloud, or a slight error in navigation. Howland Island should be ahead, but beneath the aircraft, there is only water inside the cockpit. Amelia Earhart watches the fuel gauges fall beside her. Navigator Fred Noonan studies his calculations and searches the empty horizon for any sign that they are still on course near the island. The United States Coast Guard cutter Itasca waits for them. Radio operators hear Amelia's voice clearly enough to know that the aircraft must be close. Her messages become shorter, more urgent. She appears able to hear some transmissions, but clear two-way contact never takes hold. The people below know she is searching. They know her fuel cannot last forever, yet they cannot show her where the island is. This is the most famous pilot in America. She has crossed the Atlantic alone. She has flown over the Pacific. She has survived storms, darkness, mechanical trouble, exhaustion, and years of people telling her what women should not attempt. Now none of that matters. There is no crowd in the sky, no applause, no record worth anything if the island cannot be found. Amelia reports that the aircraft is flying along a line running north and south. The operators aboard the Itasca wait for another message. It never comes. The voice on the radio disappears, and Amelia Earhart enters history as a mystery, but disappearance is only the final scene of her life. It does not explain the young woman who worked in a hospital, the beginner who struggled to pay for flying lessons, the passenger who became famous before she believed she had earned it, or the pilot who kept returning to the sky after every achievement should have been enough. Understanding why she boarded that aircraft requires going back to the beginning. Today, you are about to experience the life of Amelia Earhart. You are born in Atchison, Kansas, in the summer of 1897. From the beginning, your life refuses to remain still. Your father works as a legal representative for railroads, and the family moves again and again. Kansas City, Des Moines, St. Paul, Chicago. Before you finish high school, you attend several different schools, always learning how quickly a familiar place can become a memory. Your younger sister, Muriel, becomes your closest companion. Together, you do not behave exactly as polite society expects young girls to behave. You climb, explore, build makeshift adventures, and test the limits of what adults consider proper. You keep a scrapbook filled with stories about women who succeed in careers that are usually reserved for men: engineers, lawyers, doctors, film directors, women whose names prove that a life can be designed instead of simply accepted. You do not yet know what your own profession will be. You only know that the usual answers feel too small. The world around you is changing. Machines are transforming work, travel, and communication. Railroads connect cities. Automobiles begin replacing horses. Airplanes are still fragile shapes of wood, wire, fabric, noise, and possibility. Most people look at the sky and see danger. A few look up and see the future. At first, you are not one of them. When you see an airplane as a child, it does not immediately capture your imagination. It is simply another strange machine passing through the world. The turning point comes later, during a time of war, illness, and uncertainty. After graduating from high school in Chicago, you attend the Ogont School near Philadelphia. It is the kind of place that could guide you toward a respectable and predictable future. Then, during a visit to your sister in Toronto, you see wounded soldiers returning from the First World War. Their injuries are not stories in a newspaper. They are human beings struggling through pain, recovery, and the consequences of decisions made far away. You decide not to return to school. Instead, you become a volunteer nurse's aide at a military convalescent hospital. You help care for men whose bodies have been changed by war. You learn that courage is not always loud. Sometimes it is the quiet act of learning to walk again. Sometimes it is accepting that the future will not resemble the past. Sometimes it is showing up the next morning when the previous day has exhausted every part of you. Near Toronto, military aircraft train above a local airfield. You begin watching them. The machines are imperfect, dangerous, and astonishing. Pilots take off in aircraft that seem barely strong enough to survive the sky. They trust their hands, their judgment, their engines, and the air itself. something begins to change inside you. After the war, you return to the United States and study medicine at Columbia University. The idea of becoming a doctor appeals to your desire to do meaningful work, but the practical reality does not fit you. Once again, you discover that an admirable path is not necessarily your path. You leave school and join your parents in California. Their marriage is troubled, and part of you hopes your presence might help hold the family together. It is a familiar instinct to believe that effort, patience, and usefulness can repair what other people cannot repair for themselves. Then in December of 1920, you pay for a short airplane ride with a veteran pilot named Frank Hawks. The flight lasts only a few minutes. That is enough. The ground falls away. Roads become lines. Houses become shapes. The rules of distance change beneath you. You are no longer watching another person enter the sky, you are inside it. When the aircraft lands, your life has acquired a direction. You decide that you must learn to fly. The decision sounds romantic when told many years later. In reality, it begins with money. Lessons cost more than you can easily afford. And aviation is not a stable career for anyone, especially a woman. You take jobs. You work for a telephone company. You work as a photographer. You save what you can and arrive at the airfield dressed for the work instead of for appearance. Your instructor is Anita Snook, known as Netta, one of the few women teaching flight in the country. She does not treat you like a symbol. She treats you like a student who must learn the machine. The weather, the controls, and the consequences of error. You learn in a Curtiss Jenny, an aircraft that does not forgive carelessness. Every lesson requires attention. The engine speaks through vibration and sound. The wind changes the meaning of every movement. A pilot cannot command the sky. A pilot must negotiate with it. Your appearance begins changing with your new life. You cut your hair. You wear practical clothes. You sleep in your leather jacket, so it will look less new. You do not want to seem like a wealthy visitor playing at Aviation. You want to belong among pilots. In 1921, you fly alone for the first time. There is no instructor beside you. Every decision is yours. The runway comes toward you. The machine lifts for a few minutes. The world contains only the aircraft, the air, and your ability to bring them together safely. You land, and the impossible becomes a skill. Soon, with help from your family, you buy your first airplane, a small Kinner Airster painted bright yellow. You give it an affectionate nickname. It is not merely property. It is proof that your life has crossed a line from interest into commitment. In 1922, you climb to 14,000 feet and establish an unofficial altitude record for women. The air becomes thinner. The cold sharpens. The ground seems impossibly distant. You are still a beginner by the standards of the great pilots of your era, but you have begun placing your name into the record books. The following year, you receive an official pilot's license. You are among a tiny number of women in the country recognized as licensed pilots. It would be easy to tell the story from this point as a steady climb. It is not. Your family finances weaken. Your father's struggle with alcohol places increasing pressure on the household. Your parents eventually divorce. The support that helped you purchase your airplane can no longer be taken for granted. You sell the aircraft you worked so hard to obtain. For a pilot, selling an airplane can feel like selling access to a version of yourself. You buy a yellow roadster and drive across the country with your mother. The journey takes you through national parks and changing landscapes, but it also carries you away from the early flying community in California. You move to Massachusetts. You return briefly to your studies. You teach. You work in a hospital. None of these jobs feels permanent. The question returns, what kind of life are you actually building? In Boston, you become a social worker at Denison House, a settlement house serving immigrants and their families. You teach English. You help people understand local customs and navigate a city that can be confusing and unwelcoming. The work is far removed from altitude records and newspaper headlines, but it reveals another part of your character. You are not only drawn to personal achievement, you are drawn to the idea that opportunity should be opened for other people. You remain connected to aviation. You join local flying organizations and help promote the field. You may no longer own an airplane, but you have not surrendered your place in the sky. Boston also teaches you how fragile a flying identity can be when it is not supported by wealth. Aviation clubs are filled mostly with men who can afford aircraft, maintenance, and time away from ordinary work. You arrive from a settlement house, sometimes carrying the fatigue of a full day spent helping families solve practical problems. Then you step into conversations about engines, maps, weather, and routes, as if the sky has been waiting for you all along. You begin helping organize flying events and encouraging other women to see aviation as more than entertainment. The airplanes at the field are still noisy, uncomfortable, and often unreliable. There are no polished terminals, no pressurized cabins, and no expectation that a flight will be routine. Every takeoff carries uncertainty. That uncertainty is exactly what makes belonging matter. You do not want to be invited into aviation as a guest. You want to be recognized as someone who understands its work. Then, in the spring of 1928, a telephone call arrives at Denison House. The question sounds almost absurd. Would you like to become the first woman to cross the Atlantic Ocean by airplane? The people organizing the flight are searching for a woman who can represent the journey. She must be educated, composed, adventurous, and presentable to the press. The aircraft will be flown by two men. Your role will not be the role you truly want, but it is an entrance into history. You understand the contradiction immediately. You will be celebrated for a flight you are not permitted to pilot. You accept. The airplane is named Friendship. The name is gentle. The ocean is not. In June of 1928, you leave Newfoundland with pilot Wilma Stultz and mechanic Louis Gordon. Weather, navigation, fuel, and mechanical reliability determine whether the aircraft will reach Europe or disappear into the Atlantic. You have been led to believe that you may be allowed to handle the controls during the crossing. That opportunity does not come. The men fly the airplane. You watch, assist where you can, and understand that the world may soon praise you for being present rather than for being proven. After more than 20 hours, the aircraft reaches Wales. You become the first woman to cross the Atlantic by air. Crowds gather. Cameras appear. Reporters ask questions. Your face travels around the world. The public wants a female equivalent to Charles Lindbergh. And your appearance helps the comparison. Short hair, quiet manner, practical clothing. A serious expression that suggests courage without theatrical display. You are suddenly famous. The newspapers give you a nickname that connects you to Lindbergh. The comparison is useful for editors because it makes a complicated new figure easy to explain to the public. You become the female face of modern flight almost overnight. Children collect your photographs. Women study your clothing. Reporters want to know whether courage feels different inside a woman's body. You learn that celebrity asks the same questions repeatedly. What did you eat? Were you afraid? Did you pray? Will you marry? What should women wear in an airplane? Every answer can become a headline. Every silence can be interpreted as pride. You must protect enough of yourself to remain real while offering enough of yourself to keep the public interested in aviation. The role can feel uncomfortable, but it gives you a platform no flight school could provide. When you speak, thousands listen. You can tell them that women are capable of discipline, mechanical understanding, leadership, and professional ambition. The public may have come to see a celebrity. You try to send them home thinking about possibility, but inside the achievement is an uncomfortable truth. You know that you were a passenger. You know that your fame has arrived before the accomplishment that would make you respected. Imagine receiving the opportunity of a lifetime and realizing that it is also a test you have not yet passed. Would you accept the applause and allow the public image to become enough? Or would you use the attention as a tool to earn the achievement for yourself? You choose the second path. George Palmer Putnam, the publisher and promoter connected to the flight, helps transform the crossing into a career. You write a book about the experience. You lecture across the country. You become an editor for a major magazine. You speak about aviation, but also about the expectations placed on women. The new public life is demanding. A flight creates headlines for days. Lectures and writing turn those headlines into a living. You travel constantly. You learn how to stand before an audience and make complicated ideas feel possible. You become not only a pilot, but also an interpreter of aviation for people who may never enter a cockpit. You use fame because fame is one of the few forms of power available to you. You also continue flying. In 1929, women pilots gather for the first major transcontinental air race for women. The press gives it a playful nickname, but the conditions are serious. The machines are unreliable. The route is demanding. Accidents are possible. Critics assume that women are too emotional, too fragile, or too inexperienced for competitive aviation. You finish third. The result matters, but the gathering matters more. The women in the race understand how isolated each of them has been. Out of hundreds of licensed women pilots, 99 join a new organization created to support one another. The organization takes its name from that number. You become its first president. The women who gather around the organization are not identical. Some are wealthy. Some struggle to pay for fuel. Some want competition. Others want commercial careers, instruction, engineering, or simple recognition. They disagree, compete, and occasionally resent the attention given to one another. Yet they share a problem larger than personality. Nearly every institution around them assumes they are temporary visitors. The new organization creates addresses, friendships, practical advice, and proof that no woman pilot must remain completely alone. A member arriving in an unfamiliar city may find another pilot willing to offer help. Information about jobs, aircraft races, and regulations can travel through a network instead of disappearing inside male clubs. You understand that a record may inspire a girl for a day. A structure can support her for years. This is a turning point in the meaning of your ambition. Records can prove what one woman can do. An organization can help many women do it. You promote commercial aviation. You work to persuade women that air travel can be practical and safe. You understand that women often influence family decisions about travel, and that the future of aviation depends not only on daring pilots but on ordinary passengers willing to trust the industry. You test new forms of aircraft. You set speed records. You become the first woman to fly an autogyro in the United States and establish an altitude record in the Strange machine, which rises with rotating blades above the pilot. Your flights are not always perfect. There are accidents and public criticism. Every mistake invites people to question not only your ability, but the ability of women as a group. A man can fail as an individual. A woman in a male-dominated field is often forced to fail as a representative of every woman who may come after her. That pressure follows you into the most important relationship of your adult life. George Putnam proposes marriage more than once. He is your publisher, manager, promoter, partner, and eventually your husband. But you do not enter marriage without conditions. You have built an identity that you refuse to surrender. You keep your name. You make clear that the relationship must not become a cage. You insist that if the marriage makes either of you unhappy, separation must remain possible for your time. This is not a small demand. Marriage is often presented to women as the final destination of life. You treat it as a partnership that must coexist with work, freedom, and personal responsibility. George understands publicity, and together you create a system. You fly, you lecture, you write. The public sees a courageous pilot. Behind the image is constant planning, negotiation, travel, financing, and promotion. Some critics will later argue that your fame exceeded your technical ability. There is truth inside the criticism and prejudice inside it as well. You are not the only talented woman pilot of your generation. Others hold records and possess extraordinary skill. But you have something unusual, the ability to turn aviation into a public language. You make people care. You also know that the first Atlantic crossing left an unfinished argument inside you. The world called you a hero for riding across the ocean. You want to cross it alone. The attempt is dangerous. Charles Lindbergh's flight has made the solo Atlantic crossing legendary. But it has not made it safe. Engines fail. Weather changes. Navigation over open water offers few corrections. Ice can add weight and destroy lift. A small error can carry an aircraft hundreds of miles away from land. In May of 1932, 5 years after Lindbergh's historic flight, you take off from Newfoundland in a red Lockheed Vega. There is no crew beside you. The engine noise fills the cabin. Darkness closes around the aircraft. The Atlantic below is invisible, but its presence is constant. Fuel leaks. Ice forms on the wings. At one point, flames appear near the engine. Instruments become unreliable. The aircraft descends dangerously close to the waves. You are tired, cold, and alone with a machine that is giving you reasons to turn back. But turning back is not simple. The distance behind you can become as dangerous as the distance ahead. A solo pilot over an ocean eventually reaches a point where every direction requires courage. You continue. After roughly 15 hours, land appears. You do not reach your intended destination. You land in a field in Northern Ireland and ask the people who approach where you are. The location is imperfect. The achievement is not. You have become the first woman to fly alone and non-stop across the Atlantic. You are only the second person to complete the journey. You have also become the first person to cross the Atlantic twice by airplane. The passenger has returned as the pilot this time. The applause belongs to an accomplishment you can fully claim. The celebration after the Atlantic flight becomes almost as exhausting as the flight itself. You are carried from ceremonies to interviews, from banquets to government offices, from Europe back to the United States. Awards place metal and ribbon around an experience that still feels raw in your memory. The sound of the engine, the weight of ice, the sight of flame, the first uncertain field below. People want confidence from you. They want the adventure to appear clean and inevitable. You know how close the story came to a different ending. That knowledge does not make you retreat. It makes you respect preparation and luck more deeply. You also feel the burden of symbolic victory. Some listeners treat your flight as proof that women have now achieved equality. As if one crossing can erase every closed cockpit, every employer who refuses to hire a woman, and every family that discourages a daughter from technical work. You remind audiences that a first is only an opening. It is not a finished road. The United States honors you. Aviation organizations honor you. Presidents receive you. Newspapers celebrate you. Your name becomes permanently connected to courage, modernity, and the changing place of women in public life. But victory creates a new problem. What do you do after completing the dream that was supposed to prove everything? You keep moving. Only months later, you make the first solo non-stop flight by a woman across the United States. You write another book. You lecture so frequently that some days require appearances in more than one city. Your schedule becomes another kind of endurance test. Fame changes how people see your body. Clothing, hair, marriage, opinions, and decisions. You are no longer simply a pilot. You are a public product. And you understand that if the public image must exist, you would rather control part of it. You design practical clothing for women. The garments are meant to allow movement instead of demanding decoration. You design luggage. You write magazine articles. You use your name in business ventures that help finance the expensive work of aviation. Some people see contradiction in this. A woman who challenges convention also appears in fashion spreads. A serious pilot sells products. An advocate for independence works with a gifted promoter who shapes her image. But your life is built from contradictions. You are private and famous, careful and daring, practical and romantic. You question celebrity while using it. You resist traditional roles while understanding how appearance can open doors that skill alone may leave closed. You become friends with Eleanor Roosevelt. The two of you share an interest in aviation and in expanding opportunities for women. During one memorable evening, you leave a White House dinner and take the First Lady on a night flight. The image captures something larger than the event. Two famous women entering a space associated with male authority and treating it as a place they belong. You support women's political and economic equality. You work with organizations advocating equal rights. You speak to audiences across the country about careers, education, and the need for women to enter fields that have excluded them. You do not always speak in the language future generations will use. You are a person of your own time, with the limits and assumptions that come with it. But the central idea is clear. Women should be allowed to attempt difficult things, not because they are certain to succeed, because they have the same right to risk failure as men. In 1935, prepare for another flight that has already defeated and killed other pilots. A solo journey from Hawaii to the mainland of the United States. The Pacific is vast. The distance offers no convenient place to land. The flight is not simply a test of courage. It is a test of planning, fuel, navigation, endurance, and the ability to remain focused while the ocean below appears unchanged for hour after hour. You take off from Honolulu in your red Vega. The public understands the danger. So do you. You fly through the night and reach Oakland, California, becoming the first person to fly alone from Hawaii to the American mainland. The achievement makes you the first person to have flown solo across both the Atlantic and the Pacific. You could stop. You have enough records for several lifetimes. You have financial opportunities, international fame, and a place in history. Yet stopping has never been the point. At Purdue University, a new opportunity appears. You join the faculty as a counselor for women's careers and an advisor in aeronautics. You speak with young women who are deciding what kinds of lives they will pursue. Many of them have been taught to choose security, respectability, and approval before choosing curiosity. You want them to understand that a career is not simply a job. It can be a claim about who has the right to participate in the future. At Purdue, the conversations with students may appear less dramatic than crossing oceans, but they carry a different kind of importance. A young woman can sit across from you and ask whether she should study engineering, science, business, or aviation. You cannot promise that the path will be fair. You can tell her that difficulty is not evidence that she does not belong. You encourage students to develop practical independence, learn a skill, understand money, prepare for work that has meaning. Do not assume that marriage will answer every economic or personal question. These ideas sound ordinary to later generations, but in your time, they challenge an entire design for women's lives. Your presence on campus also connects celebrity to education. You are not merely displayed as an inspirational visitor. You advise, lecture, and participate in the university's interest in aeronautical research. The world flight grows from that environment, part personal challenge, part public demonstration, part experiment in the future of long-distance travel. Purdue supports another ambition. Through the Purdue Research Foundation, funding is provided for a Lockheed Electra, a twin-engine aircraft that you describe as a flying laboratory. This aircraft is different from the small planes of your early career. It is larger, more complex, and capable of long-distance work. It can carry fuel, navigation equipment, and the hopes of a project that will require cooperation across continents. You begin planning a flight around the world near the equator. Men have already flown around the world. Your goal is not to become the first human to do it. You would become the first woman, and your route would cover an enormous distance through difficult tropical conditions and long stretches of open water. The flight is also meant to test equipment and demonstrate what long-distance aviation may become. You are not merely chasing a headline. You are trying to participate in the development of a global future. But the project depends on details that do not care about symbolism. Fuel calculations, weather reports, radio frequencies, navigation methods, runway conditions, maintenance, crew decisions, the location of tiny islands in enormous oceans. In March of 1937, you begin the first attempt, traveling westward from California to Hawaii. At Luke Field, during takeoff, the Electra ground loops. The aircraft is badly damaged. The dream ends on the runway before the world journey truly begins. Failure becomes public immediately. Critics question the aircraft, the plan, the crew, and you. Money has been spent. Supporters have taken risks. The airplane must be shipped back to California and repaired. This is the point where many ambitious projects quietly die. A failed first attempt provides an honorable excuse to stop. You can preserve your previous achievements. You can say that the risks have become unreasonable. No one can honestly claim that you have anything left to prove. You try again. The route is reversed. Instead of traveling west, you will travel east. Navigator Fred Noonan joins you. He has extensive experience with long-distance navigation across the Pacific, a skill that may determine whether the aircraft finds small destinations after hours over open water. On the first day of June, 1937, you leave Miami. The journey becomes a chain of departures and arrivals. South America, Africa, India, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Guinea. Each leg requires new weather, new officials, new mechanics, new fuel arrangements, and another decision to lift the aircraft away from the safety of the ground. The public follows your progress through newspapers and radio. To them, the journey appears as a line moving across a map. To you, it is heat, noise, fatigue, paperwork, technical problems, crowded airfields, unfamiliar landscapes, and the constant awareness that the most difficult part still waits ahead. The route itself becomes a portrait of a shrinking world. In South America, the aircraft crosses landscapes that once required weeks of travel over the Atlantic. Africa approaches from beyond an ocean that aviation is learning to connect. Cities, deserts, coastlines, and colonial airfields pass beneath the wings. Crowds gather at stops, sometimes celebrating the journey and sometimes simply staring at a machine that seems to have arrived from the future. Yet the glamour is thin. Heat enters the cockpit. Dust finds machinery. Delays complicate schedules. You sleep in unfamiliar places and rise to study weather. Noonan recalculates positions. Mechanics inspect the engines. Officials stamp papers. Fuel must be tested and loaded. A world flight is built from hundreds of tasks that never appear in the heroic photograph. You write dispatches for readers following the journey. The words help finance and explain the expedition. But they also force you to transform immediate experience into public story while the danger remains unfinished. Every successful landing creates relief for only a few hours. Soon, the next runway appears ahead. You and Noonan cross more than 22,000 miles. Only several major legs remain. Then you arrive at Lae, New Guinea. Ahead lies Howland Island. It is only about 2 miles long and about 1 mile wide. An almost invisible target in the Central Pacific. You must fly more than 2,500 miles across open ocean to find it. The Electra needs to refuel there before continuing toward Hawaii. The United States Coast Guard cutter Itasca waits near the island. The crew is prepared to communicate, provide direction, and help guide you toward land. But the communication plan contains weaknesses. Radio procedures are confused. Frequencies do not align as smoothly as expected. You and Noonan do not use Morse code, and the Itasca crew does not fully understand that limitation. The aircraft has direction-finding equipment, but the system has caused difficulty during the journey. Every one of these problems may seem manageable on land. Over the ocean, small problems combine. On the morning of July 2nd, local time in Lae, you take off with Fred Noonan. The aircraft is heavy with fuel. The runway ends. The wheels lift. New Guinea falls behind for many hours. The flight proceeds eastward. Noonan studies celestial observations, time, speed, wind, and position. Clouds can block the sky. Small errors can grow across thousands of miles. The island ahead is not a coastline that stretches north and south. It is a point. The sun rises near your destination. You begin calling the Itasca. The ship receives some of your messages. Your signal grows stronger, suggesting that you are approaching, but two-way contact never forms. They speak. You do not appear to hear them. You speak. They hear only fragments and cannot ask the questions that might save the flight. You report that you are flying low. You indicate that fuel is running down. You search for the island, the ship, and the smoke that should reveal the position. Nothing appears. Try to imagine the pressure inside the cockpit. The engine sound has continued for most of a day. Fatigue narrows attention. The ocean repeats itself in every direction. The destination must be near, but near is meaningless when the target is almost invisible. You have spent your career telling women that they deserve the right to attempt difficult things. Now, you are inside the possibility that the attempt may fail. If you were in that cockpit, would you continue searching the calculated line? Would you turn toward another possible island? Would you trust the instruments, the navigator, the radio, or your own eyes? There is no answer available from the safety of the future. There is only the next decision made with the information you possess. Your strongest transmission reaches the Itasca. The operators believe you are close. You tell them that you are searching. Later, another message arrives. You are running along a north and south line. Then the radio falls silent. The ship calls again. No answer. Aircraft and ships begin searching. The United States government organizes what becomes the largest search for a missing airplane conducted up to that time. Vast areas of ocean are examined. Hope rises around reports of possible radio signals, then fades when no physical trace is found. The search continues for more than 2 weeks. No verified wreckage appears. No confirmed message explains where you landed or crashed. Fred Noonan is not found. The Electra is not found. Your life ends without a known final location. That absence creates a mystery powerful enough to compete with the life itself. For decades, people propose theories. Some believe the aircraft exhausted its fuel and entered the ocean near Howland Island. Others suggest you reached another island and survived for a time. More dramatic stories imagine capture, secret missions, hidden identities, or government conspiracies. The evidence does not provide a final answer. Sonar images create excitement and later prove to be natural formations. Expeditions search islands and ocean floors. Documents are released. Radio logs are examined. Each generation believes technology may finally solve what the sky and sea concealed. But the honest ending remains uncertainty. You disappear before your 40th birthday. That fact can make your life feel unfinished. In another sense, unfinished is the condition of every life that changes the future. The organization you helped build continues supporting women pilots. The students you advised enter careers that once seemed unavailable. The aircraft industry grows beyond anything the young woman watching military planes in Toronto could have imagined. Women become airline captains, engineers, military aviators, astronauts, and leaders throughout aviation and space exploration. Your records are eventually broken, as records are meant to be. Your deeper achievement is harder to measure. You made ambition visible. You showed a generation of women that a person could dress practically, speak directly, keep her own name, earn money from her work, enter technical fields, design a public life, and treat marriage as a partnership rather than an ending. You were not perfect. You were not the only extraordinary woman pilot of your time. Publicity sometimes lifted your name above pilots whose technical achievements deserved equal attention. Some decisions in your final flight remain debated. Critics can examine preparation, equipment, navigation, radio choices, and the role of promotion in encouraging risk. A serious story must allow those questions. Admiration that cannot survive complexity is not understanding. Your value does not depend on pretending that every decision was correct. It lies partly in the fact that you kept turning limitations into experiments. When money disappeared, you worked. When your family broke apart, you rebuilt a life elsewhere. When the public celebrated you for being a passenger, you returned to the Atlantic as a pilot. When aviation treated women as novelties, you helped create an organization. When fame threatened to turn you into an image, you used the image to speak about careers, equality, technology, and independence. When the first world flight attempt failed on the runway, you repaired the aircraft and began again. The pattern is not fearlessness. Fearlessness is often a story created after danger has passed. The pattern is action in the presence of uncertainty. That may be why the final flight continues to hold such power. It places the entire meaning of your life into one impossible horizon. Somewhere ahead, there should be land. Everything depends on continuing to search for it. Most people will never cross an ocean in a small aircraft, but nearly everyone eventually reaches a moment when the map says one thing and the horizon says another. A career that should have worked begins failing. A relationship that should have lasted ends. A plan built carefully over years meets a reality that refuses to cooperate. In those moments, courage is not a dramatic speech. It is the willingness to keep thinking while afraid, to ask for help, to change course when evidence demands it, to accept that effort does not guarantee arrival. Your story also carries a warning. Determination is powerful, but it is not magical. Confidence cannot replace communication. Symbolism cannot extend fuel. Fame cannot make a small island easier to find. The sky does not reward a person because history is watching. Dreams require discipline, equipment, cooperation, humility, and sometimes the wisdom to delay. That tension makes your life more useful than a simple legend. You are both inspiration and question. How much risk should a person accept in order to expand what is possible? When does persistence become danger? Can a public figure separate personal desire from the expectations of an audience? Would you have made the final attempt, knowing the records already behind you and the hazards still ahead? Tell us in the comments, not only whether you admire Amelia Earhart, but which part of her life you believe matters most: the records, the advocacy, the willingness to begin again, or the mystery that remains unsolved. Long before your disappearance, you understood that women needed the freedom to try what men had tried. That idea includes the possibility of failure. Equality cannot mean that one group is allowed to take risks while another is protected from both danger and achievement. You live that belief openly. You are born into a world where flight itself is new and women are expected to remain within narrow social boundaries. Less than 4 decades later, you are piloting a twin-engine aircraft across continents, advising university students, speaking with presidents, building businesses, publishing books, and helping shape the public meaning of modern aviation. Your lifetime is short, its distance is enormous. Perhaps that is the final lesson of your story. A life is not measured only by how long it remains visible. It can also be measured by how far it changes the horizon for those who come next. Praft. Today, people still stand beside your red Lockheed Vega in a museum and imagine the cockpit over the Atlantic. They study your letters, clothing, photographs, books, flight records, and radio logs. Pilots carry your name into new aircraft. Students learn about the woman who entered a world designed for men and refused to behave like a guest. Many arrive because they want to know where you disappeared. They leave knowing more about why you flew. The mystery asks what happened at the end. Your life asks a larger question. What becomes possible when a person refuses to let the expectations of an era become the boundaries of a life? You do not answer that question with a slogan. You answer it by working as a nurse when service is needed, by studying when curiosity demands it, by leaving paths that do not fit, by earning money for lessons, by climbing into an aircraft with no guarantee of success, by accepting an imperfect opportunity and then returning to prove what you can truly do, by helping other women rise with you, by failing publicly and trying again. The ocean keeps its answer, history keeps your name, and somewhere beyond the last radio signal, the life of Amelia Earhart continues to challenge every person who has ever looked toward an uncertain horizon and wondered whether they have the courage to leave the ground. If experiencing this life changed the way you see Amelia Earhart, give this video a like so more people can discover the person behind the mystery. Subscribe if you want to experience the lives of history's most extraordinary people from the inside. Your next life begins soon.